Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about rendering. We've done some design options and we're going to render out a couple of these. I've got a couple of 3D views that we set up before. So we'll render out this 3D view with a couple of different design options. So let's go ahead and do that. This is going to be an abbreviated rendering. You guys have been through rendering before, and if you want to access my additional videos on that, you can do that. So the rendering dialog is down here in the bottom right, or sorry, left on your view control. And if you bring that out, right, it's a little big for this screen, but I think I can get most of it on there. You can render using a particular setting, so low, medium, high. I would stay away from best. And this is going to render on your computer. So I would do draft renderings and test renderings on here for sure. It's going to do a screen instead of printer. You can pick printer and it's going to set the size based on your crop region, and you can pick a DPI. Right now we'll leave it to screen. The lighting is using exterior sun, and right now it's just in session lighting and we want to update that. So I'm going to left click on this and it's going to bring up my sun settings. And right now it's just using a azimuth and altitude relative to the view. So I'm going to go over here and click still, and our location is set up in Austin, Texas, right? And if you do that, you can look out here and you can hit apply and you can see where this sun is going to hit. So if you hit apply, right, and you can see that. Right now I don't have the shadows turned on, and maybe I want to do that before I render just to make sure that shadows are doing what I want them to do. So I'm just going to come over here and click OK and leave it set to that time and place. And I'm going to close my render dialog box. And I'm going to turn on my shadows. So you can see that's what the shadows are doing right now. It's pretty much right above it. So we can actually set our sun settings before we get into the render dialog box by coming down here to the sun and going to sun settings. This thing won't get any smaller. So I'll come over here and let's change the time. 4 o'clock, apply, right? So it's getting a little noon, apply, right? So you can start to adjust how that is, the sun is coming and hitting this sky. So we'll leave it set to right there for right now. Okay, and now if we go to render, we can render a draft with exterior sun. It's going to throw a sky back there, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. And we'll look at adjust exposure after we render. So I'm going to click render. And this is the render process dialog box, and it's going to blink, put that render out there in draft form. So basically that's what it looks like. If you want to do it in medium, you could render it again, see what it looks like in medium. Takes a little longer, right? But the quality is a little better. So you can see what it looks like there, a little better. Now, I'm not a big fan, of this background, especially with this gray. Also, unfortunately, the horizon is actually meeting right at the top of that red mass, which is not a great thing for us right now. So I will generally, when I render, come to my background, go to color, and set it to white. That way, if I want to, I can eventually update it later. So if I render it again, it'll just render out with a white background. So to me that's a little cleaner, and then also that gray horizon line is not as offensive. So I'm going to go into adjust exposure right now, and this brings up a little exposure control dialog box, and it's a little bright, so I want to make it darker. So I'll just slide this a little to the right and hit apply, and it'll make it a little darker. You can also adjust the highlights, the shadows, so if you want to make the shadows even lighter, that's as light as they're going to get, but you could also make them darker, right? So your white point, you can make it warmer, so it'll be much warmer, or you can make it cooler and it'll go much cooler. If I reset to default, and apply, it resets it all to the original. You can pull the saturation all the way down and get a grayscale, which is always your friend, or you could make it insanely Technicolor, right? So grayscale is always a nice thing if things aren't going right with your color, but you can always reset to default and click OK. Now once you're done with this, you can save it to the project. So if I click Save to Project, I can name this 3D View 1, click OK, and it saves it under Renderings. And it hasn't been categorized, so if I come over here to my renderings and I select 3D View, and I put it in the View category Working, it will put that down under the category Working. Okay, now what I want to do now is I want to come in and open up my design options. And I actually want to make option 1 primary, so I'm going to make that primary and click Close. Right, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to render. And it's going to render out that other design option, right? So you can do the same image over and over again. I can then save that to project as View 2. Click OK. Go ahead and categorize that as Working. So it'll stack down there for me. There's View 1 and View 2. So you can use your design options and your render options to adjust. Now, if you're doing it for print, you're going to want to send it to the printer. The other thing that you can do is you can export it. So if I export, it gives you the option of JPEG, bump, and ping and TIFF. With I'm not sure with the bump, but I know with the ping and the TIFF you can get an alpha channel. So if I go to a ping and I save this right now, I'll be a little lazy and save it to my desktop. This would be my 3D View 2. Right? We'll save that. Right? And then I'll go ahead and close that. You'll see option 2 come up, and I wonder what it renders are like. I've never done this. Let's render that. If it renders, because it's not in the primary option, I don't know if it'll render with it sort of grayed out or not. I think it should render, looks like it's rendering just the same. So there's option 2, or sorry, View 1, and I can export that, and we'll export that as a TIFF, right? And we'll name that View 1, save. Okay. Alright, so you can save them out. Let's go back to the main model. So you don't actually have to make it primary to render it. You can just flip it in and out here and it will render just fine. Alright, so the next thing I'll go over is sheets and placing the images on sheets.